Hello and welcome to another MFL resource video. This one is all about dice. It's called One Pen, One Die. This game is really good for translation, also good for a rowdier class, one that needs some activity, some sort of game to keep them engaged. This is pretty low prep. All you need to do is have a short text or some sentences, maybe even some words. You have the language that fits the level of the class that you are teaching. As the name suggests, you need one pen and one die. I recommend using mini whiteboards and put the students into pairs, groups of 3. I think 3 is probably the limit, maximum limit for good participation. Otherwise it does turn into kind of like a dice game rather than a language game. The way that this works, you can pause this video and read the instructions and ignore me. But the way that this works is very simple. To start off with, both or all players in the group taking turns to roll the dice. The first person to roll a 6 grabs the pen. There is only one per group, but each of them have a mini whiteboard. So they grab the one pen for the group for their mini whiteboard, and they start translating. This could even be a dictation game if you were building up from the basics. So very, very flexible. And they start to, let's use the example of a translation, translate the language into English, into French, whatever you were working with. As they are doing this, the other pupils in their group are rolling the dice. And this is where it can get quite competitive, because if you have a bit of motivation, you're going to roll the dice as much as you can, be as quick and competitive to try and get the pen. You just need to win. You just need to roll a 6 to do that. So that might be straight away. It might be look at the dice 20, 30 rolls later. You could start off with mixed groups, mixed ability. Really, as it progresses, my recommendation is that you put your higher ability or your more motivated students, quicker writers, that kind of thing, together, because otherwise you will end up with a situation where a lower ability player has been trying, but just by virtue of maybe not knowing the language as well, they're just going to get steamrolled. This is also a great opportunity to add in a competitive element with points. So your partners might be competing against one another, but depending on maybe the collective progress that they've made as a 2 or a 3, as and against other groups, they might get more points. That might help if you've got one student who does everything and his partner got nothing. They might actually get less points overall. Again, it just comes down to thinking ahead. Take 5 minutes just to plan out a few extension activities to just add an extra 5-10 minutes with 2 extension tasks. As you can see, there's a French text here all about monde du travail, le petit boulot, le bénévolat, le travail volontaire, things like that. I'm working currently with my Year 11 French on, this particular week, voluntary work. And it's worked well. They're a class that, if they get a little bit restless, can get out of hand, can get disruptive. So this has worked really well. Make sure you've got some dice, some pens, whiteboards, and see how it works for you. As I say, this works really well for rowdier classes, works really well for teenage boys, because you get them out of the seats, potentially by moving around the room, moving to different teams. You could even have competitive team versus team, one pen, one die. That would work well with pairs, that the 2 are competing against another 2, maybe one of which is dictating and the other is translating and isn't on the board. So there you go, straight off the bat, off the top of my head, there's an extension activity. And please don't underestimate or maybe should I say overestimate, how much language you need for one lesson. Maybe last lesson we've gone through the sentence builder as a class, and so they've kind of got an inkling, shall we say, of the language that they're going to see in this text. It's not totally new. I don't think this is an activity that lends itself to completely new language, unless you were perhaps doing dictation. You're transcribing, you hear French, read French, and you write French, and maybe that's an accuracy game. As I say, this particular game with a few tweaks could really serve multiple purposes. But in terms of the volume of language, that text right there, I would almost say is almost too much for my particular class, because there's so much there that they haven't yet properly internalized and mastered. But I'd probably play with that text. I'd play around with it, maybe in a few other activities add one or two sort of thematic changes, might change the verbs, might change a few nouns, and I want to make sure that the stuff I replace it with is fairly familiar, if not really familiar. I try not to overthink my sort of structuring and my managing. I think the role of a teacher is important, but there is just an element of not chance, it's not random, but just because we are trying to control things doesn't necessarily in the language classroom mean that we get the outcomes that we want. We're working with human beings, we're working with organic brains. Some stuff goes in really quickly, some stuff doesn't. So try and make it fun, try and get that repetition in there, and I'm confident the rest will take care of itself, provided I just keep feeding them and giving them opportunities for helpful recap. But yeah, that text right there could be a lesson, maybe even 2 lessons, chunky lessons. Not maybe in that form, but certainly keeping that volume of language. I think that's certainly sufficient. At the end of the day, if my students are really familiar with that volume of language for that particular topic, I think in a British MFL classroom with year 11s, that's kind of a victory. So yeah, don't sell yourself short, don't overestimate, don't give yourself too much work. Maybe with the starter activity and then a few variants of one pen, one die, that could be 80% of a really good, really successful lesson. Again, just have that 5-minute planning and know what you are using it for. Start at the end, as one of my mentors at PGC used to say. Start at the end and work your way backwards. Know what you want to achieve, know what sort of fences, boundaries you want to set for the students, and then work your way backwards and giving them opportunities to explore as much of that space and as deeply as possible. So there's just some thoughts on the back of that activity. Worked really, really well today. Low prep, very flexible. You just need some dice. Just make sure you've got them. Some teachers try and replace an actual dice with, like a digital dice on the phone. In my experience, that's just kind of a car crash. It doesn't really work, and you don't get the fast pace of learning and the competitive element. I personally think it's better. You might have it on the interactive whiteboard or on the board, but it lends itself, in my opinion, best to sort of like an analog offline. So yeah, I hope that's really helpful. Hope you have a great day. Hope you're enjoying your teaching and that this can be of some interest and encouragement to you. So, all right, bye-bye.